The meaning of letting go. Letting go. It sounds so simple when we say it out loud. Doesn't it? 3 little words that carry the promise of freedom. But when it comes to real life, when it comes to love, to identity, to memories of a past we replay hoping it could somehow change, letting go becomes one of the hardest things we'll ever face. Think about it. How many times have you held on to something long after it stopped serving you? Maybe it was a relationship that had already ended in spirit, but you clung to it because the silence of being alone felt unbearable. Maybe it was an old version of yourself, an identity that no longer fit, but still felt safer than the unknown. Or maybe it was a memory, a story you kept revisiting, telling yourself, if only it had gone differently. We hold on, not because it makes sense, but because it feels familiar. And in the human heart, familiarity often disguises itself as safety. We convince ourselves that if we just keep holding on a little longer, maybe we won't have to face the emptiness. Maybe we won't have to accept the loss. But here's the paradox. That grip, that clinging, is often the very thing that creates our suffering. It's resistance in disguise, and resistance always has a cost. The Stoics knew this long before modern psychology ever gave it a name. They taught that true peace doesn't come from forcing life to remain as it was. It begins the moment we stop clutching at what no longer fits. The moment we stop confusing attachment with love, control with clarity, suffering with loyalty. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time you felt heavy, not physically, but emotionally? A heaviness that made even the simplest days feel exhausting. That heaviness often comes from carrying what was never meant to be carried this long. It could be the relationship you outgrew but never admitted to yourself. It could be the anger you replayed toward someone who never apologized. It could even be the guilt of choices you made years ago. Ones that taught you lessons but still linger like chains around your heart. The Stoic answer is not to deny these things or to pretend they never mattered. Quite the opposite. It's to honor what they once were. Acknowledge the role they played in your life. And then, when the time has come, release them with courage. Just as a tree must shed its leaves in autumn to survive the winter, we too must practice the art of subtraction. Not because it's easy, not because it doesn't hurt, but because growth demands it. Now, you might be wondering, does letting go mean I didn't care enough? Does it mean I failed? The truth is, letting go doesn't erase the love you gave, the effort you poured, or the memories you built. It simply means you've chosen not to confuse clinging with caring. It means you've stopped mistaking suffering for strength. And here's the beauty of it. The very act of letting go doesn't shrink you, it expands you. It frees the space you need for clarity, for new beginnings, for a life that actually aligns with who you are becoming instead of who you used to be. But let's be real, letting go doesn't happen in an instant. It's not a single decision. Like flipping a switch, it's a process, a slow unwinding of the story you've been telling yourself, a gradual loosening of the grip you've had on the illusion of control. Sometimes, it feels like peeling away layers of yourself until you finally see what's underneath. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it feels like grief, because in some ways, it is. You're not just letting go of a person, or a role, or a dream. You're letting go of the version of yourself who lived inside that chapter. And mourning that version is natural. But mourning doesn't mean you're stuck. Mourning means you're evolving. The Stoics remind us, life is constant motion. People change, roles shift, chapters close. And wisdom isn't about trying to freeze the story. It's about aligning with the movement of life instead of fighting against it. So, let me ask you again, what are you holding on to that has already ended? What version of yourself are you gripping that no longer reflects who you are? What weight are you carrying out of habit, not out of love? Because here's the truth most of us avoid. Letting go is not the end of something. It's the beginning of freedom. It's the start of peace. It's the space where new life can take root. And maybe, just maybe, the most courageous thing you'll ever do isn't fighting harder to hold on. It's daring to release with grace. Part 1. Letting go of what no longer serves. There's a strange truth about life that most of us resist. What once helped us grow can eventually become the very thing that holds us back. Something that once felt like nourishment, a relationship, a habit, even a belief, can, over time, turn into a burden. But because it was once meaningful, we struggle to admit that its season has ended. Think about it. Maybe you once had a relationship that gave you strength, laughter, and comfort. It helped you through tough times. But slowly, it changed. Maybe love turned into guilt. Maybe connection turned into routine. And yet, you stayed, not out of love, but because the familiarity felt safer than the silence of starting over. Or maybe it isn't a relationship at all. Maybe it's an identity. The old you. The version of yourself who worked a certain job, dressed a certain way, or believed in certain things. At one point, that version helped you survive. But now, holding on to that old self feels like wearing a costume that no longer fits. Still, we keep putting it on. Because change feels uncomfortable, even when it's necessary. The Stoics had a clear way of looking at this. They believed that life is in constant motion, nothing stands still. People evolve, roles shift, chapters close, and wisdom isn't found in trying to freeze the story. It's found in aligning with the movement of life instead of resisting it. But here's the challenge. Our minds don't like change. They tell us lies. They whisper, if you let this go, you'll be lost. If you walk away, you'll regret it. If you stop holding on, you'll fail. And so, we cling. We cling to memories that no longer inspire us. We cling to relationships we've outgrown. We cling to versions of ourselves that no longer feel real. Yet holding on too long is the real betrayal. Not a betrayal of others, but a betrayal of yourself, of who you are now, and of who you are trying to become. Let me ask you something personal. What are you carrying right now that has turned into weight? Is it an unresolved memory you replay every night before bed? Is it a friendship that drains you more than it lifts you? Is it a dream you once had but no longer excites you? Yet you feel guilty letting it go? These questions aren't comfortable, but discomfort is often the sign that you're touching on something real. And then there's this idea of closure. So many of us tell ourselves, I can't move on until I get closure. We imagine that one final conversation, one heartfelt apology, or one perfect explanation will set us free. But the truth? Closure rarely comes the way we want it. Sometimes the apology never arrives. Sometimes the explanation never makes sense. Sometimes the person you need closure from doesn't even realize the weight they left behind. The Stoic approach is different. A Stoic doesn't wait for someone else to close the chapter. He creates peace within himself by accepting what is. Closure isn't something that's handed to you, it's something you create. And you create it the moment you decide to stop watering what no longer grows. Think about a tree. In autumn, it doesn't beg its leaves to stay. It doesn't plead with them to keep clinging, to keep pretending that summer isn't over. It simply lets them fall, because it knows that without that release, there can be no spring. The same is true for us. Letting go doesn't mean you're dismissing the value of what was. It doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you're wise enough to recognize that what once nourished you may now be holding you back. I remember speaking to someone who stayed in a job for nearly 15 years. Even though he hated it, when I asked him why, he said, because it once gave me stability. Notice the word, once. At one time, the job was a blessing. But at another time, it became a cage, and he admitted, deep down, the only thing keeping him there was fear. That's the thing. Letting go always feels like a loss at first. But in reality, it's a gain. You're not throwing away the past. You're honoring it. You're saying, thank you for what you gave me, but I don't need to carry you into my future. So if you find yourself stuck in the middle, half living in the present, half chained to the past, ask yourself this. What am I holding on to out of love? And what am I holding on to out of fear? Because the answer to that question will often reveal exactly what you need to release. And remember, letting go doesn't happen all at once. Start small. Choose one belief, one expectation, one unresolved tension in your life. Hold it up to the light of truth and ask, is this helping me grow? Or is it keeping me stuck? If the answer is stuck, then you already know what you need to do. The courage to let go is the beginning of freedom. Not freedom from the past itself, it will always be part of you, but freedom from the chains that keep you circling it. And once those chains fall, you begin to move differently, think differently, even breathe differently. The Stoics weren't afraid of endings. They saw endings as transitions, as necessary doorways into new chapters. And the sooner we learn that lesson, the lighter our steps become. So take a moment today. Look honestly at your life. And if something has stopped nourishing you, if something has turned into weight, then remember this. Letting go isn't rejection. It's respect for yourself, for the past, and for the future that's waiting to unfold. Part 2. Letting go is not weakness. It's liberation. We often grow up believing that holding on is strength, that persistence is always noble, that clinging is proof of loyalty, and that walking away is some kind of failure. But the truth? Sometimes holding on is not strength at all. Sometimes it's just resistance. Resistance to reality. Resistance to truth. Think about the last time you stayed in a situation longer than you should have. Maybe it was a relationship, a job, or even a dream that no longer matched your life. At first, it felt honorable to keep fighting for it. It felt like you were showing commitment, patience, resilience. But deep down, you knew the truth. The season had ended. The chapter had closed. And yet, you resisted. That resistance comes at a cost. It drains your energy. It fills your days with frustration, your nights with overthinking. It convinces you that tomorrow will somehow look different if you just hold on a little longer. But tomorrow rarely changes when we refuse to let go. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And what greater waste is there than resisting what has already ended?" Time is precious, yet so often, we spend it replaying, clinging, or trying to resuscitate something that no longer has life. Imagine trying to carry water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. That's what resistance feels like. We think our grip will save us, but all it does is accelerate the loss and exhaust us in the process. Letting go, on the other hand, feels different. It doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean you failed. It means you've chosen truth over illusion. It means you're done confusing suffering with strength. And that choice is not weakness, it's liberation. But here's the hard part. Letting go almost always feels scary in the beginning. Because the moment you release something, you're confronted with silence, with emptiness, with uncertainty. And uncertainty terrifies us. We'd rather cling to a painful certainty than face an unknown possibility. Yet it's in that very unknown where freedom begins. Think about the times in your life when you finally let something go. Maybe a toxic friendship. Maybe an unhealthy habit. Maybe a version of yourself you outgrew. Do you remember the weight that lifted? At first, it felt like grief. But over time, that grief transformed into space. Space to breathe. Space to grow. Space to finally redirect your energy towards something that gave life instead of taking it away. The Stoics would tell us that our suffering rarely comes from events themselves. It comes from our resistance to them. When we fight reality, we suffer twice, once from the loss itself, and again from the refusal to accept it. And that's the paradox of letting go. The act that feels the most painful at first is the one that ultimately sets us free. So let me ask you, what are you resisting right now? What truth have you been postponing? What ending have you been avoiding because you're afraid of what comes next? Maybe you're waiting for someone to change. Maybe you're hoping the past will rewrite itself. Maybe you're convincing yourself that clinging to what hurts you is a form of strength. But strength is not in the grip. Strength is in the release. Imagine you're climbing a mountain, but you're dragging behind you a heavy backpack filled with rocks, old regrets, old identities, expired commitments. How far can you climb like that? At some point, you'll collapse under the weight. Liberation comes the moment you decide to take that backpack off. Not because the rocks never mattered, but because they don't belong to the climb ahead. That's what letting go really is, not abandonment, but alignment. It's saying, this chapter mattered, it shaped me, but it does not define me, and I will not waste my limited time resisting the truth of its ending. The world might tell you that walking away is weakness, but the Stoic knows better. The Stoic understands that there is nothing weaker than exhausting yourself fighting reality, and nothing stronger than facing it with courage. So today, instead of asking, how much longer can I hold on? Ask, what could open up if I let go? Because every ounce of energy you free from resistance is energy you can redirect into creation, growth, and peace. And that shift, from clinging to releasing, is where life begins again. Part 3. Peace comes from pruning. When you look at a tree in autumn, you see something beautiful happen. The leaves begin to fall. Not because the tree hates them. Not because they were useless. But because the tree knows it cannot survive the winter carrying everything. It must shed what no longer serves, in order to conserve energy for what truly matters. We are no different. Our lives accumulate weight, old habits, unnecessary obligations, outdated identities, and relationships that have run their course. And at first, they may have been good for us. They gave us growth, comfort, or a sense of belonging. But like leaves that have lived out their season, they eventually become too heavy to carry. Yet unlike the tree, we resist pruning. We pile on more commitments, more distractions, more noise. We convince ourselves that peace will come from addition, from adding more control, more answers, more possessions. But the Stoics remind us of a hard truth. Peace rarely comes from accumulation. It comes from elimination. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, often wrote to himself about this practice. He reminded his mind to strip away what was unnecessary, to return to simplicity. He knew that clutter, whether physical or mental, wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous. It diluted focus, blurred judgment, and, most of all, stole peace. And isn't that what so many of us struggle with today? A crowded schedule, a crowded mind, a crowded heart. We mistake busyness for purpose, noise for importance. We keep adding, thinking one more achievement, one more purchase, one more, yes, will finally bring calm. But in truth, the more we add, the further peace drifts from us. So what's the alternative? Pruning. Pruning is the conscious decision to cut away what no longer nourishes you. It's the courage to say, this doesn't belong in my life anymore. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Not because you hate it, but because you love yourself enough to make space for what matters. Think of your inner life like a garden. Over time, weeds creep in, resentments, distractions, false obligations, unnecessary fears. Left unchecked, they choke out the flowers of presence, clarity, and purpose. The only way to protect the garden is to prune it, to bend down, identify what doesn't belong, and cut it out before it overruns the whole space. Ask yourself, what have I outgrown? What am I still maintaining just because it's familiar? Which habits or commitments drain my energy but add no meaning? These questions aren't easy. In fact, they can feel brutal, because pruning requires honesty. It requires admitting that not everything you've carried forward belongs in your future. And that's uncomfortable, because so much of what we carry is tied to identity. To let it go feels like letting go of a part of ourselves. But here's the truth. Pruning isn't rejection. It's refinement. It's not about hating what once was. It's about honoring it for what it gave you, and then releasing it so that what matters most can thrive. When you prune your life, you create something rare in today's world. Space. Space to focus. Space to listen. Space to actually be present with yourself and with others. Without that space, you cannot hear your intuition. Without that space, you cannot anchor your values. And let me be honest, pruning is not a one-time event. Just like a tree faces autumn every year, you too will face seasons of shedding. As you grow, you'll have to let go again and again, of habits that once helped you but no longer fit, of people who no longer align with your values, of identities that no longer reflect who you're becoming. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. The Stoics walked this path daily. They practiced subtraction, not addition. They understood that wholeness isn't about having everything, it's about carrying only what serves your highest self. So, pause for a moment, look at your life as it stands today. Where is the noise? What activities, commitments, or connections are taking up space without giving back value? What stories do you keep retelling even though they've stopped being true? Peace isn't found in holding on to everything. Peace is found in pruning gently, but firmly, with compassion, but also with clarity. Because in the end, not everything that once belonged still belongs. And not everything you lose is truly a loss. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the space created by letting go. And it is in that space where peace finally enters and stays. Part 4. Let go with love, not bitterness. There's a subtle but powerful difference between running away from something and truly letting it go. On the surface, both look the same. You walk away. You move on. You leave something behind. But deep down, The energy you carry forward makes all the difference. Running away is fueled by resentment. It's leaving while still holding anger in your chest, while still replaying the story in your head, while still wishing for revenge or an apology that may never come. And here's the truth. When you leave like that, you don't really leave, you carry the bitterness with you. And it poisons the next chapter of your life. True letting go, on the other hand, isn't about rage, it's about release. It's about walking away with love and gratitude, not hatred. Gratitude that it happened, gratitude that it taught you, gratitude that it ended. That doesn't mean you approve of everything that took place. It means you refuse to let what hurt you turn into the core of who you are. The Stoics remind us of this often. It's not enough to move on physically, you have to move on emotionally. You don't just cut ties with the situation, you also cut ties with the bitterness it left behind. Think of it this way. Imagine you've been holding a glass of water for hours. At first, it's fine, but the longer you hold it, the heavier it feels. Eventually, your hand cramps, your arm shakes, and the pain becomes unbearable. Bitterness is like that glass of water. You may think you've set down the relationship, the job, the dream, but if you're still holding on to anger, you're still carrying the weight. And here's what's even harder. Often, the bitterness isn't directed at others, it's directed at ourselves. We resent ourselves for staying too long, for trusting too deeply, for ignoring the warning signs. And that self-resentment quietly eats away at our peace. But the Stoic doesn't waste energy drowning in self-blame. He reflects, he learns, and then he releases. He chooses compassion over condemnation. He chooses to walk forward with dignity intact, mind clear, and heart unburdened. Let me ask you, what are you carrying right now that still feels heavy? Is it anger toward someone who betrayed your trust? Is it guilt toward yourself for not walking away sooner? Is it resentment for all the time you feel you wasted? Now ask yourself this. What would it feel like to let that go, not with rage, but with love? To say, yes, it hurt, yes, it ended, but I refuse to let bitterness be the lens through which I see the rest of my life. That choice doesn't make you weak, it makes you free, because when you release something in anger, it has a way of sneaking back. A memory triggers it, a song reminds you, a thought reopens the wound. But when you release in love, the cord is cut cleanly. The wound may leave a scar, but scars are proof of healing, not of chains. Think of a time in your life when you held on to resentment. How did it feel? Did it make you stronger, or just heavier? And now, think of a time when you finally forgave, even if the other person didn't deserve it. Didn't that feel lighter? Didn't that feel like a doorway opening inside you? Letting go with love is one of the hardest things you will ever do. Because it requires you to rise above your emotions without denying them. It requires you to feel the hurt, but not become the hurt. To remember the lesson, but not let the lesson define your identity. And that's the real strength. When life gives you every reason to be bitter, and you choose instead to be better. Not for them, for you. The Stoics knew this. They didn't wait for apologies. They didn't wait for the world to hand them closure. They created closure by choosing acceptance, by choosing perspective, by choosing love over poison. So the next time you face an ending, whether it's the end of a relationship, a job, a dream, or even a version of yourself, don't just ask, how do I walk away? Ask, how do I walk away with love? Because that question will shape your future. The way you leave determines the energy you bring into what's next. If you leave with anger, you carry anger forward. If you leave with gratitude, you carry freedom forward. So pause, breathe, and consider this. Maybe the most powerful act of strength is not fighting harder, not demanding payback, not clinging to closure. Maybe it's choosing to let go with love, even when you had every reason not to. Because in the end, bitterness chains you to the past. Love frees you for the future. And the future is where your life is waiting. Part 5. Living with detachment. When people hear the word detachment, they often misunderstand it. They imagine coldness, indifference, or emotional numbness. They think it means not caring about anything or anyone. But true detachment is nothing like that. It isn't about shutting yourself off from life. It's about experiencing life more clearly, without being enslaved by it. Detachment doesn't mean you don't love, it means you don't confuse love with possession. It doesn't mean you don't care, It means you care without the desperate need to control. It doesn't mean you're emotionless. It means your emotions don't control you. Marcus Aurelius captured it perfectly. Accept without pride. Let go without attachment. Those words hold a wisdom that can transform how we live. Think about it. How often do we turn something beautiful into something painful simply because we refuse to let it breathe? A parent who loves their child so much that they suffocate them with control. A partner who clings so tightly that the relationship loses its joy. A dream pursued not with passion, but with obsession, until it burns us out. Love, connection, ambition. These things are meant to flow. But when we cling, we distort them. What was once a gift turns into a prison. The Stoics knew this. They didn't deny the beauty of relationships, achievements, or possessions. They simply reminded themselves that nothing truly belongs to us. Everything is borrowed, people, things, even time itself. To live well is to hold them with open hands. Let me share a story. A man once told me about his father's watch, a priceless heirloom. Passed down through generations, he wore it every day with pride. But one afternoon, he lost it on a busy street. For weeks, he tormented himself. He replayed every step, searched every corner, cursed himself for his carelessness. The loss consumed him. Finally, he came across a line from Epictetus. Don't cry because your cup is broken. But remember it was fragile from the start. And in that moment, he realized, he had loved the watch as if it were eternal. But nothing is eternal. By clinging to what was always temporary, he had doubled his suffering. That's what detachment saves us from, not from love or joy, but from the unnecessary pain of expecting permanence where there is none. Now ask yourself, what are you clinging to right now? Is it a person, afraid they'll leave? Is it a possession, terrified you might lose it? Is it an image of yourself, desperate to protect it at all costs? Clinging always comes from fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of not being enough. But detachment frees us from that fear. It allows us to say, I will love fully, but I will not possess. I will enjoy deeply, but I will not demand permanence. I will live with passion, but I will not confuse control with meaning. Imagine loving someone without needing to own them. Imagine working on your dreams without letting the outcome define your worth. Imagine enjoying your possessions while knowing you'll be fine if they vanish tomorrow. That's detachment. That's freedom. It's like holding a bird in your hands. If you grip too tightly, you harm it. If you hold gently, with space to breathe, both you and the bird experience joy. That's how we should hold life. Detachment isn't about distance, it's about clarity. When you stop clinging, you see people as they are, not as you wish them to be. You love them more honestly. Because your love isn't built on control or fear. You see life as it is, not through the fog of expectations. And let's be honest, this is not easy. Our culture teaches the opposite. Advertisements tell us to cling to products. Movies tell us love is obsession. Society tells us success is ownership. No wonder detachment feels foreign. But it's in that very foreignness where wisdom lies. The Stoics practiced this daily. They reminded themselves that wealth, fame, health, even life itself, are gifts, not guarantees. To wake up each day and treat what you have as borrowed is not pessimism. It's gratitude. Gratitude that says, I don't own this, so I will treasure it while it's here, and release it gracefully when it goes. So, how do we live with detachment in practical terms? When you love, remind yourself, I do not own this person. I am here to share, not to possess. When you work, tell yourself, I will give my best effort, but the outcome is not in my control. When you enjoy life's pleasures, whisper, this moment is temporary, and that is what makes it beautiful. Detachment doesn't numb you, it awakens you. It makes every smile, every conversation, every sunrise more precious, because you're not lost in the illusion that it will last forever. And perhaps that's the deepest wisdom the Stoics gave us, to hold everything lightly. To walk through life with open hands, knowing that what is meant for you will stay, and what is not will pass. And in both cases, you will be at peace. So let me ask you, what could your life look like if you loosened your grip just a little? If you stopped clinging and started trusting? If you allowed love, joy, and purpose to flow freely through you, instead of trying to trap them in your hands? Maybe the freedom you're searching for isn't found in grabbing harder. Maybe it's found in letting go with grace. Because detachment is not the absence of love, it's the fullness of it. And that fullness, lived without clinging, is what makes life not just bearable, but beautiful. Part 6. Surrender to evolution. Life is always moving, always changing. Nothing in nature stays frozen. Rivers flow, seasons shift, people grow, and yet, how often do we find ourselves resisting this constant motion? We dig our heels into the ground, clutching tightly to the way things used to be. And in doing so, we make ourselves suffer. Epictetus once said, "Peace comes when you align your will with what is happening, not with what you wish would happen." Those words may sting at first, because they remind us that much of our pain isn't caused by life itself, but by our refusal to accept it as it is. Think about a time when life forced change upon you. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe a relationship ended. Maybe your health shifted in ways you didn't expect. In those moments, the instinct is to fight, to ask, "Why me? Why now? This isn't fair." And the more we resist, the heavier it feels. The loss doesn't just hurt, it consumes us. But surrender is different. Surrender doesn't mean giving up. It doesn't mean lying down and letting life trample you. True surrender is active. It's a conscious choice to stop fighting reality and instead walk with it. It's saying, "I may not have chosen this change, but I will choose how I respond to it." Think of a surfer riding a wave. If he resists, if he fights against the pull of the ocean, he will drown. But if he surrenders to the movement of the wave, he discovers freedom. He discovers flow. That's the difference. So ask yourself, where in your life are you still fighting the tide? Where are you trying to freeze what was never meant to stand still? Maybe it's a chapter of your past you replay every night. Maybe it's a version of yourself you no longer are. Maybe it's the illusion of control in a world that was never yours to control in the first place. The Stoic path is not about conquering life, it's about cooperating with it. To surrender to evolution is to trust that even if you don't understand the change now, it may be carrying you toward growth, toward strength, toward clarity you couldn't see from the old shore. Let me share something personal. A man once told me about how he was fired from his job of 20 years. At first, he spiraled. He saw it as failure, as humiliation, as the end of his identity. But slowly, he began to surrender. He started walking every morning, journaling, asking himself questions he had avoided for decades. What do I actually want? What gives me life? That loss, which he had resisted so bitterly, became the very thing that freed him. Today, he calls it the best thing that ever happened to him. That's the power of surrender. It transforms endings into beginnings, obstacles into lessons, chaos into clarity. So the next time life changes in a way you didn't plan, pause. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" try asking, "How can I align with this? What might this change be teaching me?" Surrender doesn't weaken you, it strengthens you. Because when you stop fighting reality, you finally free your energy to build the future. Part 7. The power of emptiness and stillness. But here's the thing, after you let go, after you surrender, something strange happens. There's silence, a space, a void, and for many people, that emptiness is terrifying. We're not taught how to sit with silence. We're taught to fill it, with noise, with distractions, with people, with constant motion. The moment something ends, we rush to replace it. We leap into the next relationship, the next project, the next distraction, anything to avoid the emptiness. But here's the paradox. That emptiness is not your enemy. It is your teacher. The Stoics believed that stillness was where wisdom is born. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to retreat inward whenever the chaos of the empire overwhelmed him. Seneca advised moments of solitude, because only in quiet can the mind hear itself. Think of an artist staring at a blank canvas. At first, it's uncomfortable. The emptiness seems intimidating. But without that empty space, no masterpiece could ever be painted. The same is true of your life. Emptiness is not proof that you've lost. It's proof that you are being given space to create again. And yes, it will feel lonely. Yes, it may even feel like grief. But if you resist the urge to fill it too quickly, if you resist numbing it with distractions, that emptiness transforms into clarity, into self-knowledge, into freedom. Ask yourself, How often do you allow yourself to just sit with nothing? No phone, no noise, no scrolling, just silence. For most of us, the answer is almost never. We are so uncomfortable with emptiness that we rob ourselves of the chance to hear our own souls. But here's the truth. Silence is where your soul speaks. It's in stillness that you begin to understand what you actually want. Not what the world told you to want. It's in emptiness that you learn who you truly are without all the labels and distractions. So don't be afraid of the void that comes after letting go. Don't rush to fill it. Let it breathe. Trust it. Because the void is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of wisdom. Think of the dawn. Before the first light of morning, the world sits in darkness. It feels empty, but that emptiness is necessary. Because only in that stillness can the light arrive. Maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you've let go. Maybe you've surrendered. And now you're standing in silence, unsure of what comes next. If so, remember this. The silence is not punishment. It is preparation. It is the fertile ground where your next chapter will grow. The power of emptiness is that it teaches you patience, resilience, and trust. It shows you that you don't have to fill every space to feel whole. Sometimes, the emptiness itself is what makes you whole. So the next time you feel that void, instead of asking, "How do I escape this?" try asking, "What might this emptiness be opening inside me?" Because within the silence, there is wisdom. Within the stillness, there is rebirth. And within the emptiness, there is the quiet promise of a new dawn. Part 8. Closure comes from acceptance. We often believe that closure comes from other people. We wait for that apology, that explanation, that final conversation that will somehow make everything make sense. But how many times has that moment never arrived? How many times have you been left staring at silence, wishing someone else would hand you peace? The Stoic truth is this: closure doesn't come from them. Closure comes from you. It begins the moment you stop resisting the past. Because here's the hard reality: no amount of explanation will ever rewrite what already happened. No apology can undo the betrayal. No reason will erase the loss. The past is carved in stone. And the more you wrestle with it, the deeper your suffering becomes. But when you accept the past as it is, when you stop fighting to change what cannot be changed, something remarkable happens. The loop of suffering breaks. The endless replay, the what ifs, the why me, they finally lose their grip. Acceptance doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It doesn't mean you're okay with the pain. It means you've chosen to stop giving the past permission to control your present. It means you've taken back the pen and said, "This chapter is over. I'm ready to write the next one." So if you've been waiting for someone to hand you closure, let me ask you this: why give them that power? Why let your peace depend on someone else's words, someone else's timing, someone else's awareness? The power has always been yours. And the moment you accept that, the chains of the past begin to fall. Part 9. Letting go is strength. Society often tells us that letting go is weakness, that real strength is found in holding on, in fighting harder, in never giving up. But that's not always true. In fact, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to release. Because holding on when it's over isn't strength, it's fear. It's fear of the unknown, fear of change, fear of who you might be without that relationship, that job, that identity. And fear disguised as loyalty only drains your life. Seneca once said, "It is not that life is short, but that we waste much of it." And one of the greatest wastes is clinging to what has already ended. Think about it. A warrior doesn't cling to a broken sword. He lays it down and arms himself with what will serve him next. The same is true for us. Letting go is not surrendering to defeat, it's aligning with truth. It's creating space for what's real, for what's alive, for what's meant to grow. And here's the paradox: the world may see your release as weakness, but only you will feel the quiet strength it takes. To let go is to stare fear in the eye and say, "You will not control me. I choose freedom." So the next time you feel torn between clinging and releasing, remember this: letting go isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your alignment. It's planting the seeds for a future that actually reflects who you are now, not who you once were. Part 10. Growth requires goodbye. Here's a truth we rarely like to admit: growth often demands a goodbye. Sometimes it means saying goodbye to people you love, Not because you hate them, but because your paths no longer align. Sometimes it means letting go of old dreams. Not because you failed, but because you've outgrown them. Sometimes it means shedding identities that once defined you, but no longer fit the person you were becoming. And yes, it hurts, because every goodbye feels like a small death. People around you may even say, "You've changed," and they'll be right, but change isn't betrayal, it's evolution. The caterpillar must say goodbye to crawling if it ever wants to fly. The child must say goodbye to innocence if they want to become an adult. And you must say goodbye to the past versions of yourself if you want to step fully into your future. This doesn't mean you dishonor the past. Quite the opposite. You honor it by recognizing it gave you everything it could. You say, "Thank you for shaping me, but I cannot carry you further." That's not betrayal. That's respect, for both your past and your future. So don't be afraid of the goodbyes that growth demands. They are not signs of failure. They are signs of becoming. Conclusion. The Stoic message of letting go. At the end of the day, no one can do this work for you. Letting go is an inner discipline. It's not something a book, a video, or even a teacher can hand to you. It's a choice you must make again and again, to stop clinging, to stop resisting, to stop replaying the past. And here's the liberating truth. Letting go is not loss. It's rebirth. It's realignment. It's the rediscovery of yourself without the chains of what once was. The victim mindset, the blame game, the endless grip on what could have been, all of these rob you of power. But Stoicism invites you to take that power back, to choose responsibility over blame, to choose creation over complaint, to choose to transform the past into wisdom instead of wounds. Because you are not just living inside a story, you are the author of it. The pen has always been in your hand, and every day, you get to decide, will I keep rewriting the same chapter? Or will I turn the page? So if you remember nothing else from this message, remember this. Letting go is not the end. It's the beginning. It's not weakness, it's strength. It's not betrayal, it's alignment. And as you release what no longer serves you, you'll discover the truth the Stoics lived by. Peace isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. Your future is waiting. The page is blank. The pen is yours. What will you write next?